Welcome to the weekly update for June 18th, 2021. I'm the Reverend Aaron Stockwell, Senior Minister here at First Parish. This is an exciting weekly update. We're going to get to meet our ministerial intern for the next 2 years, Elizabeth Murphy. So I have some questions to introduce Elizabeth, and then we'll talk about what's coming up for this week and looking forward. So, as I said, Elizabeth Murphy will be our ministerial intern for the next 2 years. And I felt like these weekly updates are a really great way to kind of get to know folks. We did it with our affiliated community minister, the Reverend Mr. Barb Grieve. So we're doing it with the next person to join our staff. So Elizabeth, how about just kind of general introductions? Who are you and so forth?
Sure, thanks. Yes, my name is Elizabeth. I do use the full name, Elizabeth. That's what I go by. I get that question a lot. I am married to my spouse, Keith. I have 2 children. They are both teenagers. And we live in Dartmouth, Massachusetts on the South Coast. This is actually the community where I grew up. And we've come back here to raise our kids and work. And as a result, we have a lot of deep connections. We have a lot of family in the area. But we have found a lot of new ways of branching out and meeting other people through our UU community down here, which is in a neighboring town, which has been really important for us over the last few years to connect with people who kind of think similarly and open us up to new ideas.
Great.
We live near the water. We like gardening and the beach and that kind of stuff this time of year.
Wonderful. So what excites you about ministry? Why are you looking down this path?
Sure, I actually love that question. I'm excited about ministry. And actually, I was just listening to a podcast this morning where they were asking the author how he ended up writing the book that he did. And he said, sometimes there's just a convergence of a bunch of things that you're sort of obsessed with, and it leads you down a path. And that for me was just like, that describes exactly how I feel like I ended up where I am right now. I was looking potentially to make a career change for the last 3 or 4 years, but I never had quite found something that felt like I could really combine all the diverse things that I'm interested in and passionate about, and also some like technical skills that I have. And when I started doing a lot more deeper volunteer work and a little bit of other stuff with my church community, like these little lights started going off, realizing like, wait, I get to do all the things I love to do. I have been an advisor and a counselor in the past, so pastoral care and relationship building one-on-one. But I also always wanted more space for speaking and writing and sharing information, and all these different ways of working and building communities were the things I wanted to do in my career that I wasn't able to sort of get the right mix. And so this process went by and I realized, I think this is it. Like, I think this is the way that I can actually combine all these different things together and have a lot of different options to do that.
Great. So you kind of started to touch on my next question, but I guess, first of all, you're in seminary. You've completed your first year at Meadville Lombard?
Yes. Yeah.
Which is one of our Unitarian Universalist identity seminaries that forms UU ministers in a what are they calling it these days? Distance? What's the current lingo on their format?
I think they're calling it hybrid format right now, because next year we will go back to some in-person learning.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So what did you do before seminary?
So prior to seminary, I actually owned my own business. I was a solo practitioner for about 15 years as an independent college counselor. So what that means is I worked privately. I had an office in town with mostly high school students and their parents, and served, I would often describe it as kind of a liaison between the students and the parents, and helping them navigate their school relationships and their household relationships, and how are we thinking for the future, and kind of try to make that, honestly, it was a lot of like peacekeeping and goal setting and task management and things like that. And I did that for a long time, and I really enjoyed it for lots of different reasons. And as time went on, I really started to resent it for lots of different reasons, which I think happens after 15 years of doing something. There was much I loved about the building relationships with kids, and there was much I really didn't like about the way that college as an industry has been changing over recent years, and the pressures that that's putting on students and families financially and personally. So I felt like it was time to do something different, but I also really wanted to maintain some level of that, counseling, nurturing, relationship building component.
Definitely. And looking back to my own high school to college experience, that's a huge rite of passage and a huge liminal moment. So what a gift you'll bring to us here, having been through rites of passage, not like the big, well, it is a big one, going off to college and discerning that and all the family dynamics that come out there. So what great preparation.
Yeah, it's a big one, and it's a long one. I think liminal space is a really good way to describe it, because that's kind of what has happened. Is it's, years ago it was a little bit more straightforward, and now everything is just spread. So there is a long time of waiting and pondering at a really turbulent time for a lot of young people too.
Yeah, definitely. So I know you have a current role in your congregation in Fairhaven. Could you describe that a little bit, and also share what's something of your current ministry that you're most proud of?
Sure. So for the past 18 months, I have actually had a role at the UU Society of Fairhaven as the community organizer for a program that we began called the New Bedford Immigrant Support Network. And ultimately, when that was first grant funded at the start of 2020, we had already been operating as an immigrant accompaniment network in the area, which meant largely that we had a pool of volunteers who were actively involved in working to support immigrants and work with the immigrant community. And what they had identified that they really needed was help with transportation. Where we are on the South Coast, New Bedford area, it's actually quite far from the federal courthouse in Boston. It's quite far from the ICE offices up in Burlington. Lots of people need all their medical care at Boston Medical Center. So really, without being able to get driver's licenses, that was the greatest need within the community, and one that we were able to mobilize quickly and use all these different resources and create. So I did that as a volunteer. And then for 2 months before the pandemic hit, that was the focus of my work, building our accompaniment network. When the pandemic hit, it really shifted to be like, okay, I was kind of almost like a free agent in a sense in our community, to be able to step in and support primarily at first the immigrant community during the COVID crisis in the early days, when everyone had lost their jobs and food security was a big factor, and education and all these things, because I didn't have a population that I was a case manager for or anything like that, where most of my community partners did. They were trying to actively support families that they were in some way responsible to support. And I just had time and a computer and a car and ability to kind of go and connect the dots. So it was really, looking back on a year ago, an amazing experience. And one of the things that I would say I'm most proud of in this year of ministry was the ability and the opportunity to go out into our community in a time when really like the roads were quiet and there wasn't much going on, and make these connections as an individual with other individuals who were in need of Tylenol or masks or laundry detergent or whatever, food supplies, all these different things. We did grocery runs, all this kind of stuff, but also by doing that on the individual level, the connections that we were able to forge as the Unitarian Universalist Society of Fairhaven in the greater New Bedford community as a trusted resource who you could count on, who would find volunteers, who would find money, who would do the things that needed to happen, and really build relationships that now have flourished in lots of different ways, has been so meaningful for me and also for our congregation. I think we're at a different place than we were 18 months ago in terms of realizing the potential that we have to make an impact and also be impacted by our wider community.
That's great. That definitely sounds like something to be proud of. And I think a lot of great skills from that experience will transfer to your explorations here at First Parish in Framingham. I'm wondering, I don't know how many sermons you've preached so far, but what are your favorite topics to preach on?
So I've only done a handful, and I will say that I tend to be, in our rotation of who preaches in Fairhaven, I tend to be the person that we go to for the, like, let's celebrate and reflect and let's take a look back on what we're doing here. That has been my angle in general. I did that in the fall for us when we were still very much like physically not in the same space and trying to connect and help people see what they were doing when they couldn't see it. And actually just at the end of May, I did sort of a recap, kind of let's look at the wider impact that our efforts are having and what we can continue to do moving forward, with some critical examples of the work that we've done over the last year. So that's kind of been the type of stuff that I've been doing so far, and I'm interested to start doing some other things too, but that's the role that I've been filling at our congregation. Yeah.
Great. What's been the most interesting class you've taken in seminary so far?
So I've got kind of like a top three right now. The first one, not necessarily the most interesting, but the one that I think was probably most formational for me in my first semester. I just took a class called Healthy Boundaries, Healthy Ministry. And that was what I needed to hear most as I was beginning this journey in seminary. And I have found it, along with working with a spiritual director over the past year, like just transformational in terms of my own formation as a minister, but also in just how I look at my life and the way I spend my time and the way I structure things. And I am so grateful that I took that course right away when I did. I also took a community organizing and ethical leadership course this spring, which was really, really great, amazing reading that we did, and also lots of practical tools and things like that. But the one that I was most surprised, I would say, that I really, really enjoyed and learned a lot from was the history of global Christianity, which is a required course. And I was just thinking, oh, this will be good to get done now. And I found, looking at the history of global Christianity from this long view historic perspective, far more interesting and engaging and relevant in so many different ways. And I'm excited to continue that type of study looking forward as well.
Great. Anything else that you want the folks at First Parish to know about before we kind of wrap this up?
I don't think so. I'm excited to start and to get to know new people and get involved with all that's going on. So I would say I'm just eager to meet everyone and get going, and hope there's a good summer before then.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of outline what the next 2 years looks like, my understanding is that the first year of a Meadville Lombard internship is a lot of observation. Is that your understanding as well?
That is, and to be honest, and as someone who did all this college and career counseling for a long time, I have to say that I really do appreciate. Meadville Lombard does a part-time internship over 2 years instead of a full-time over 1 year. It breaks down to the same amount of time. But by having that first church cycle where you're in a more observational role, it means that in that second year, you've lived it once, right? And you can really dive in more, and it's not your first time going through everything. Because of course, as we know, whether you're a teacher, a minister, an accountant, there's that cycle to the year, and you do the first time through is quite different than the successive one. So
Yeah.
it is intended to kind of build in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we're still working out the preaching schedule, but Elizabeth will probably be preaching 5 or 6 times that first year, same the second year. Some of the stipend for Elizabeth, for you budget wonks out there, some of that will come from the guest preaching honorariums. So you'll be seeing the same amount of me in the pulpit, and just a little bit fewer guest preachers, but we'll have Elizabeth, who will be getting to know our congregation as another preacher. And then the other part of the stipend comes from the Gardner Intern Fund, which is part of our endowment. So that's how we're funding this position. I know that's always the important question: is how do we fund this? So I hope that answers that question. We're putting together an internship support committee. That's one of the requirements. And they'll be meeting on a monthly basis with Elizabeth. Andre LaMontagne, I know, will be one member of that. We're looking for others. Andre and I have been kind of brainstorming a list of folks. And I'll be meeting with Elizabeth on a weekly basis for supervision and discussion. At least that's my understanding. I hope that matches yours as well.
Yeah.
Good. So other things, First Parish, that you should know about. This Sunday will be the last sermon that I'll be preaching for about 6 or 7 weeks. We'll be talking about Juneteenth. As you hopefully heard, President Biden signed Juneteenth into law. It is now a federal holiday. That's a big deal. But we're going to look at what that holiday meant and what this holiday will mean, especially for us as the First Parish community going forward. So I think that is all of the announcements that I have for you. Next week is General Assembly, so virtual General Assembly. So I'll kind of be tuned in there, but still check an email. And then I'll be going on study leave and vacation after that. So I think that's it. Hope to see you on Zoom coffee hour or in other places that I might see you. Bye, friends.